I found that I could control my own destiny. And that's really what the American dream is all about. If you are willing to put in the time and willing to put in the effort, it doesn't really matter where you came from or who you are. You still have the opportunity to succeed in this country.
We have in studio with us James W. Keyes. He is the global financial leader, a best-selling author, philanthropist, artist, musician, a pilot, a number of other things. He has headed up 7-Eleven Inc. and in the past even Blockbuster. His philanthropic initiatives are certainly broad and, of course, has been on the board of governors of American Red Cross. He's been the former chairman of the Dallas Symphony, which we love to go to as well. But also the personification of the American dream, came from very humble origins, and we will be talking about some of that, and even a member of the Horatio Alger Association. We have a link to jameswkeyes.com, so you can find that on the website, and we'll be talking about this book, Education is Freedom. James Keyes, great to have you in studio.
Kerby, it's great to be with you.
Your name shows up from time to time in different philanthropic endeavors, but even going back to 7-Eleven, one of the reasons you began to investigate education is because there was an attempt to kind of cut back on some of the giving. You're saying, well, wait a minute, education is key. And, of course, the introduction actually talks about the fact that anytime anybody's been with you, they've heard you say education is key. But let me come back to one very key element, and that is your humble origins. Because, as you point out early on in the book, you didn't come from a situation which would necessarily have predicted that you would be a philanthropist and a global leader. So tell us about that.
I didn't, but this is America. And I am, as you mentioned, living truly the American dream because I did literally grow up in a 3-room shack with too many kids and too little money. I was not expected to go to school. I was not expected. In fact, there were virtually no expectations of me. Nor my brothers and sisters. We were just going to probably follow in the same path as our parents and others in the family. But I found that education was an opportunity to open doors. And the more I learned, I found the more I could do. And it was just an amazing journey that resulted from my focus on learning.
Let me just mention that some of you like to take some notes, and it'll be real easy. As a guy that teaches in seminary, we like to have things start with the same letters called alliteration. He calls them the C-suite learnings. We're going to talk about what to learn. That's change, confidence, and clarity. We're going to talk about how to learn. That's critical thinking, curiosity, and creativity. And then why we learn collaboration, cultural literacy, and character. Really easy to remember, and of course I glanced at that, but I could almost keep it in my head because what you're trying to do is help us understand how education is key. And I think along the way we'll also point out the fact that our educational system has failed a lot of our students because we're spending a lot of money, but we're not producing a great educational product. But if we're looking to the future, and my latest book is coming out in about a couple of weeks here, it's called Facing the Future. You're talking about the future is in our hands. And if we want to build a nation that is strong, if we want citizens to understand the rights and privileges they have, and we want to compete on a global market, education is key, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to personal responsibility. That's why the subtitle is The Future is in Your Hands. We have a tendency to be a society of victims sometimes. You know, we like to blame others. Well, I'm poor, or the man did it to me, or whatever. And today, there's really no excuse. You think about the power of technology. Your cell phone is a portal to unlimited learning versus what I had growing up, which is a set of borrowed encyclopedias, right? So it truly is an opportunity for everyone. And in so many ways, it is the solution to so many of the challenges that we have in society today.
Well, yeah, let's come back to that idea in your hands, because later on in your book, you talk about integrity and character and things of that nature, and you talk about building your character, which I appreciated, because I was afraid as we're going through an education book, you're going to say, well, you get your character from the schools. Well, we know that, frankly, a lot of individuals that go off to college come back hating the country or hating Israel. Maybe not necessarily well prepared for the global economy that we're competing in. And again, if you're going to be successful, it really is in your own hands, isn't it?
It truly is. And it's easy to blame others. It's easy to make excuses. I was one of those kids. There were no expectations. But I found that I could control my own destiny. And that's really what the American dream is all about. If you are willing to put in the time and willing to put in the effort, it doesn't really matter where you came from or who you are. You still have the opportunity to succeed in this country.
This book is 16 pages, by the way, 16 chapters, I should say, and it is part of a series that I think you'll appreciate because it takes you through learning to lead, living to learn, what to learn, how to learn, why we learn, and learning to live. And we again have a link to jameswkeys.com. Came out in February, but let's get into some of the aspects because education is freedom. You're talking about finding the spark. What was the spark in your life, as I think we already know, that made a difference in actually the success that you have today?
I did. You'd be surprised to learn that the spark was crisis. The spark was adversity. I could give you a long list of the things. Poverty was just one of the challenges that I faced with, parents divorcing and my father passing away at a young age. But those challenges that I faced, I discovered that there's two ways you can respond to change, two ways you can handle crisis. You can have your head down, or you can use your combination of your faith and your knowledge to find a better path. And that's what, thankfully, I discovered as a child. I was blessed with two parents, both from different religions. My dad was Baptist, my mom was Catholic, so I like to think I had the best of both. But both of them were people of faith, so they, from a very, very early age, helped me in my faith formation. But they didn't know why education was important because both of them dropped out of school before the 7th grade. But they knew it was important, so they encouraged me to learn as much as I could, and used to say in a somewhat fatalistic way, they can take your house, they can take your car, they can't take what you know.
That's right. I've said that so many times too, and some similarity. I had a mother that never graduated from high school, went through maybe 2 years of high school. That was the best we did there. But I thought, James, let's come back to you for just a minute and talk about this spark, but also the backstory. Can you share that with us?
Sure. The objective was to be able to help others discover their path just as I had, because I realized what a privilege it was to be able to pull myself out of that situation and to lead a Fortune 500 company or two Fortune 500 companies. And I attributed it not just to education itself, but to those three things you mentioned: what to learn, how to learn, and why. And these things, as you mentioned, I've tried to make them simple by putting them into, 3 C's each. Right. But the first, the what to learn, actually came to me shortly after being named CEO of 7-Eleven. And I was struggling with that self-doubt that we all have. Am I really able to do this? That imposter syndrome. I've made it now to this role. Right. And I actually had a dream. And in this dream, it was almost an out-of-body experience. I felt like I was afraid I had passed in the dream because the bright light, the feeling of overwhelming love. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. It was so powerful, I didn't want to wake up. And I wrote down, I was asked to do 3 things, and I accomplished 3 tasks, and I was told I was going to be given a gift at the end. And at the very end, after accomplishing all 3 tasks, I woke up. And I was so disappointed because I didn't get my gift. And I wrote down 3 things. And when I leaped out of bed, I just wanted to remember this dream. It was so powerful. And the 3 words I put on paper were change, confidence, and clarity.
There you go. That's in your book.
The what to learn. Yeah. Exactly. The foundation of the book. And I struggled with that a little bit. I said, I don't understand this. And I woke up my wife and I said, hey, I've got to tell you about this dream. And I was supposed to get a gift and I didn't get it. But I wrote down these 3 words and I don't know what they mean. And she said, of course, that is your gift. How do you think you came from the challenges that you had without being able to embrace change and find the positive, any negative circumstance? And how do you do that? You have a sense of confidence that you can learn how to do anything and accomplish it. And then you have a way of breaking very complex things into simple terms, a simplicity about you, that those 3 things, change, confidence, and clarity, are the gift that allowed you to come from where you came from, which was nothing basically, to lead a Fortune 500 company. And so that's your gift, Jim. And so my objective in the book is to share that gift, that idea of what to learn, that anyone can do this. The idea is to take the power back,
right,
not be a victim.
Well, and again, I think you've done a very good job of putting this together in what you call a C-suite. Let me just, for just a second, in your second chapter, talk about the state of education. And one point you really point out this issue of poverty, which you can speak to only so well, and that a lot of young women around the world do not go to school. I was thinking of the other day this commentary that came from Condoleezza Rice, of all people. And one of the things she said in her speech was that the crisis in K through 12 education is a threat to the very fabric where we are, because the point that she was making is that some cases, tell me your zip code, and I can probably tell you the kind of education that you receive. And if you've ever watched the documentary Waiting for Superman, or a variety of other educational documents, or even some of the more recent ones that I've posted here from people like John Stossel, you can recognize that we do have a real significant educational challenge. And though you grew up in poverty, you were able to, with encyclopedias and some other things, get a kind of education which is almost being denied to a very significant part of America and certainly around the world.
It is a challenge. We definitely have to fix our education system, but there's an important point here. We are not going to fix it by casting blame, by wringing our hands, by being the victims. The only way we're going to change the education system is by recognizing what we need to do and how to do it. So I'll give you an example. The existing system was built by the Rockefellers, the Mellons, et cetera, recognizing the need for an educated workforce.
Right.
And they built the public school systems that we know it today. They set it up as best they could, but think about what they were trying to accomplish.
Workers.
Mass production of workers, standardization of everything.
Gotta love that from Russia. Yeah.
Exactly. The very bells that announced class change came from the factory floor. So recognizing that, we are still using the same methods, the same principles we still teach with books and blackboards, right?
Yeah.
Yet we're in the age of technology. We've transformed retail. We've transformed space. We've transformed all of these things. The power is there for us to change the way we teach and learn, but we have to recognize it, and we've got to get out of this cycle of just frustration and Band-Aids that we're putting on the old system and recognize that we can create an entirely new way using the technologies available at our fingertips today and transform the classroom, really engage students. Think about how engaged they are with video games.
Yeah.
They can be just as engaged with biology or math, as shocking as that may seem. We can do this with technology.
And I've seen teachers do it. And again, I've said this before, that let's say you could go back to the future. We'll do it back to the future style. We'll park a DeLorean out here. We'll go back 100 years, and then we'll take somebody from there here. And if we took them from a factory in the early part of the 20th century and took them to a factory today, they might not even recognize it, because there would be robots and there would be all sorts of high-tech things and lots of computers and all this. You could take them from a classroom 100 years ago and put them in a classroom today, and it may not look any different, other than maybe some of the kids have some strange devices in their hands. So obviously, everything else in our world has changed. Education is still using an outmoded model that is not terribly effective. And even so, it's more effective in other countries than it is here. So there's some things we need to solve here as well. So I did want to acknowledge that that's a chapter in your book. But let's get back to some of those C's, because I know people would love to take some notes. And one of those is what to learn. And that gets to change, confidence, and clarity. First of all, embracing change. I think you've already talked about that. Confidence, just developing the inner strength to believe in ourselves. And then clarity, making the complex simple. I've picked up that that's one of your gifts. Many people think it's mine as well. I've taken these complex things like artificial intelligence or critical race theory, or even more recently, some of the things having to do with genetic engineering, and trying to make them simpler. And it seems to me that that's really one of the things you believe that we need to begin to change in the educational system, right?
Yes, exactly. You know, in fact, I call it the algebra of thought.
Yes.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, I picked up one of his videos, and he was talking about, why do we learn algebra? Yeah. And I never thought about why, because I've never used it again a day in my life. But I do.
Teach you how to think.
Teach you how to think. And what algebra does, if you think about it, you take a long equation and you put parentheses around the different functions. You solve for pieces of that equation. And basically all you're doing is you're taking a very complex thing and you're breaking it into simple pieces so that then by the time you get down to the bottom, you go, oh, that wasn't that hard. And it's that same thing that we have to do with complex ideas and thoughts. We have to break them into smaller bite-sized pieces so that we can then digest them, and then they're not that complex anymore.
I like that. You know, this new book out, Algebra of Money by Scott Galloway, is another one that we've talked about on this program. And again, all of that. But that's in a whole section here on what to learn. So again, those of you taking some notes, you might put down change, confidence, and clarity. And even right now, your kids may not be in school, but if you wanted to teach them some things, maybe you could pick off one of those ideas, change or develop confidence in them or clarity. I want to talk a little bit more about how to learn. That's critical thinking. That's a big one for us. We actually do critical thinking sessions here because unfortunately it's not taught so much in the schools anymore. Curiosity and creativity. That's on how to learn. And then later on, we'll talk about why we learn. All part of this book, Education is Freedom. And if you'd like to know a little bit more, we do have a link there, and it will take you to James W. Keyes, Keyes. Don't even have to know how to spell it, because if you click on his picture, it will take you there. Also have the book, which is available, and it has come out in both hardcover and Kindle. So if you'd like to get a copy of it, I think it would be something that would be a real encouragement to you. Now, as I've read through the book, I was struck by the fact that this is something I could give to any young person. You know, sometimes if you're looking for a graduation gift or you want maybe kids to get excited about education when they're not, this might help. But you found that all sorts of other sort of unexpected constituencies have appreciated the book. Can you speak to that?
I did. I didn't expect the enthusiasm from the business audience, but I used a lot of business examples in the book from my experience at 7-Eleven and Blockbuster over many years. So I found it in many ways to be a guide for entrepreneurs, the roadmap to success for entrepreneurs. But I also found that I've been on a couple of faith-based speaking circuits, and I found that the faith audience also has embraced the book, and because I think in particular, I talk about knowledge being the antidote to fear.
Right.
And that so much of the challenge that we face in society today is fear-based. Everybody's afraid somebody's going to take something from you, do something to you. And many, many of these issues can be solved with knowledge. It's like I use the example when you're a kid and you're scared of the dark, you turn on the light and then you realize, oh, okay, I guess I don't have a monster under the bed, right? And that's what knowledge is. But it's an important combination of knowledge and faith. And with those two things, we have nothing to fear, if you think about it.
Well, and again, if you think about education, those of us that went to Ivy League schools know that Harvard and Yale and Princeton and William and Mary and all these were founded as religious institutions. And again, I don't know how you can achieve some of the things that you talk about later in the book. Everything from character to integrity to persistence to gratitude without necessarily having a faith component. So those are certainly important issues as well. So let me just mention, education may not be a topic that you always talk about in a small group or a Bible study or a life fellowship or something like this, but this might be a book that will get you into that in a way that would be very helpful. But I did promise that we would also talk a little bit about not only what to learn, but how to learn. And this section here on critical thinking, you really hit our hot button because we, as you might know, you met my producer just a few minutes ago, we've tried to bring people in either by phone or in studio to talk about critical thinking. Now, of course, you already pointed out the fact that one way to get good at critical thinking is algebra, geometry, whatever it might be, but also just understand logic. And then the issue of curiosity, intellectual curiosity. I think that's one of the reasons why homeschooling is so successful, because you can have self-directed education. If all of a sudden kids are just into dinosaurs, or they're into computers, or they're into Legos, whatever, you can use that to teach. And then the other is creative. We're all born creative. And you just met my producer. He just wrote a very good booklet that we made available on this issue of creativity. So those 3 C's, critical thinking, curiosity, and creativity, are really part of, again, how to learn. Can you speak to that?
Sure. They are part of the learning process. That curiosity is the foundation of all learning, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And we stop being curious too often.
Yes.
After we get out of school, we say, okay, I've learned all I need to learn. But your degree is really a license to keep learning through your whole life.
You do talk about lifelong learning in here. And
exactly.
I know I'm always talking about this idea of lifelong learning. And yet I know some people, matter of fact, the statistics say, James, that there are a number of people that have not read a book since they graduated from high school.
It's true. It happens. It happens. And part of that is just to be able to get excited again about learning and rediscovering it. And part of that is, that's why I mentioned the creativity part, because Einstein actually called creativity, I love this quote, intelligence having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have fun with learning anymore. And that's part of the reason young people are not engaged in the learning process. They don't have fun at school, but it can be fun. So I'll give you an example. I play the piano. It's a creative process. I'm not a good pianist at all. But I didn't learn to play the piano. There's an important distinction here. If I had, then I would have had that teacher slapping my knuckles all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I play the piano to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference because now I can have fun with it. And I turn that creative process into a learning experience, whether it's piano, whether it's art. It's just fun.
And again, just some really important ideas there in terms of critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, and the rest. But I thought we'd also get into this section on why we learn. And that is something which, again, I thought was very interesting: collaboration, cultural literacy, and character. And one of the things about cultural literacy is we have found that young people really don't know a great deal about our world. And as a result, when we ask them things like, can you name how many justices are on the Supreme Court? Only a few could mention that. 3/4 could not identify the states that were part of the 13 colonies. When you ask them, how many individuals serve in Congress, how often does the president run for office? I mean, just some kind of basic things for cultural literacy. You do sort of, after a while, James, say, what's been going on in the schools? And I think a lot of parents have said, for the first time during COVID-19, remember this? They're looking over the shoulders because their kids are supposedly learning online, and we're saying they're not learning anything that we used to learn when we were in school. So we need to come back to some of the basics, don't we?
We do. The basics are there. We just need to reignite the interest in the basics and get back to the fundamentals. It's not really that hard. They're there. We can teach them. I think to some extent we may be distracted by so many other things that we want the children to learn. And honestly, teachers are kind of under the gun right now because if you think about it, that's a hard job. It's a really hard job. So I'm less critical of what we're teaching today and the way we're teaching it, and more a fan of celebrating the teacher, trying to figure out how to make that job the important job it is. That's the first line of defense. They're like our firefighters and our policemen.
Right.
First line of defense for the next generation. So how do we elevate them and elevate that whole role? And again, I think we can use technology to make their job even more interesting and more effective.
What about collaboration? Because that's another part of that. It seems to me that there are individuals that are not teachers, but they could be resources for teachers. They are not going through the educational process. They're not members of the teachers union, but they could be depended upon to provide a collaborative type of effort. And you're shaking your head, so talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of resources we can bring to the table. We've created an organization in Dallas that brings volunteers to the table to be able to go into the classroom and help young people understand how to get to college and what are the right skills to have and those kinds of things. So collaboration is important. The concept of collaboration in the book is really one of, in today's world of technology, we tend to be individual performers.
Right.
We
Yes.
get behind our computer screen, right?
Right.
But the challenge is that that's not the way the world works. And I use the symphony. You mentioned that I was chairman of the Dallas Symphony.
Yeah, Dallas Symphony.
I love this analogy or this metaphor because the orchestra, one instrument, sounds okay, but not great. You throw, with the violin, you throw a couple of horns in, and then you bring in a cello and you bring in an oboe, and wow, it's a beautiful harmony. And then that idea that collaboration actually creates more than what an individual could perform with, then you take it to another level. And the cultural literacy part is to say, we have more to learn sometimes from people who aren't just like us than people who are just like us.
Right.
And if you put that again in the symphonic terms, imagine the cello looking over at the violin saying, "You skinny little thing, what's the matter with you?" And then they're all making fun of the oboe because he's squeaky.
Yeah.
Right. And then the bass, oh my goodness, what does he look like? But again, you put these different sounds, unique sounds, unique experiences together, and it creates a beautiful harmony. So cultural literacy, the idea is, with all of the challenges we face with DEI and diversity and a lot of polarization on both sides of this issue, we can't forget that the real spirit is that the more different we are from each other, the more we can come together in harmony and create even greater things.
I did want to finish off with this idea of character. And once you talk about character, it's amazing because then you also talk about the issue of gratitude, humility. These are all, if you will, biblical concepts, biblical ideas and values and things of that nature, the need for community and sharing. So in some respects, as we kind of finish off this idea of what to learn, how to learn, and why we learn, you end with this idea of character. And that is really important. And I think it's one of the places where the schools have failed us. Because as soon as you start saying, well, you need to teach values, immediately have people say, well, what values? Well, can we at least agree that stealing is wrong? Can we agree that there are certain things that are right and wrong? Can we say that the virtues that we have from classical studies, even from Christian ideas, are part of what we should be teaching? But nevertheless, that's, I think, where you talk about the fact that sometimes you have to be responsible for your own character and integrity, don't you?
Exactly. And it's part of the future is in your hands. And my message especially, well, again, I started out with this being a message to young people, but it's really a message to us all.
Yeah.
That I put it into business terms. I can't help it. I'm a business guy.
No, of course.
So I describe it as, we all have favorite brands. Some of us like Coke, some of us like Pepsi, some of us may prefer RC Cola or an unbranded cola beverage. When you pick up that brand, you know what it stands for. You can tell by the packaging, so the appearance is pretty important, the external appearance, but what's even more important is what's inside. Mm-hmm. Can you trust what's inside? And that's what our character represents, that level of integrity that people can count on us. The humility, the gratitude, those are the elements that are inside. They're not a sign on our chest, but they are in many ways. They're what people feel and see when they interact with us. So I characterize that to anyone reading the book as that's your brand. And your brand is important to maintain and always preserve the value of your brand as you interact with other people. And when I put it in those terms, I try to encourage them now to pay attention to your character, pay attention to your sense of integrity and how people are seeing you. And all of the other elements of the book, of course, critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, all come into play in making one's brand of value.
That's very good. And when you talk about character, sometimes people get character and reputation confused. And so you have this quote from Abraham Lincoln. I've never seen it before, but I'm going to steal it if that's okay. Character is like a tree, and reputation is like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. So lots of times people say, well, I have a good reputation. As a matter of fact, we're supposed to have a good reputation. The Bible speaks to that issue as well. But reputation is not your character. Reputation is the shadow of the tree. I thought it was just a great illustration. But then you have all sorts of aspects of that. Integrity, where it all begins. Integrity, it's all one. We have an integrated circuit and things like that. Humility, remaining humble and welcome the thoughts of others. It is amazing that sometimes in the business world we say, no, I don't want to be humble because I have to promote myself. But you know what? The guy sitting next to me, maybe the guy sitting on the airplane as we're traveling, or the individual on the other end of the table who's just joined the company might have a really good idea, and we need to listen to them. Gratitude, being thankful for the gifts, and then, of course, opening your eyes by waking up, the sense of community. You're really talking about all of that. But one of the other characteristics, and I know you are embodying it, is persistence, because from the very beginning, I think anybody that saw you would probably say, well, I wish the best for him, but, you are probably not talking about executive level material. We're not talking about a global business leader. We're not talking about a best-selling author. We're certainly not talking about a pianist or a musician, an artist, or a commercial pilot, and yet you're all of those things, aren't you?
Kirby, I've got a good story behind that. I was at McDonald's flipping burgers as a kid, and I saw a plaque or a poster on the wall that Ray Kroc had put across in all of his McDonald's. And it was a Calvin Coolidge quote about persistence and determination.
Yeah.
Basically said, talent's important, knowledge is important, education is important, but persistence and determination are omnipotent. And I took that plaque off the wall when they were ready to throw it away. I took it to shop class, decoupaged it.
Such a great story.
Put it on a plaque. It's been on my desk throughout high school, college, and every job I've ever worked at. That plaque has been within arm's reach.
And that's so good. Again, you are going to enjoy the book, but let me just mention that we have a link to jameswkeys.com. Now, there is a place where you can see information about the book. There is a way in which, if you wanted to donate, if you'd like to know a little bit more about him, you can see some of the endorsements. You can make a donation to your Educational Freedom Foundation, and there's all sorts of biographies and things of that nature. And if somebody would be interested in maybe having you come and share your story and talk about the book, how can people contact you?
At jameswkeys.com is the website, and my Gmail address is on there. They can reach me via, it's actually keys.james.w at gmail.com. But yes, I'm happy to come, and I as you can probably tell, I love sharing the gift.
Yes. Well, and that is the gift, and it all goes back to that incredible, if you will, dream that you had, but it also just gets into how this could be used. So just before we go, again, you intended it for the student out there, but I think parents are really appreciating this, and business people are. So talk about that for another minute.
Well, the idea, my objective with this book is that, we all have hundreds of books on our shelves. I love my library. But I would love this book to be something that you give to someone else who needs it. We all have friends that are a little bit lost. Maybe their character needs a little brushing up. And if I can help others help themselves, or if I can help others to give a gift that will help someone else, then that's really my objective, to spread the word.
Well, again, I just wanted to mention one more time, education is freedom. The future is in your hands. If you'd like to know a little bit more about James W. Keys, of course, we have information about that on our website. And I hope that you will actually click on the picture there in his book. So, James, I've known about you. It's been great to sit across from you and wish you well. And you have a few other stories that maybe a little bit later you might want to share with us. So I hope you'll come back sometime.
I would love to come back. It's great to be with you.
Well, hope you appreciated the conversation we had here today. And don't forget that if you would like more information about what we're talking about, you can find it at the website pointofview.net. That's all we have for today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.